Manuel loved living in the countryside, and even if he had all the money in the world, the man would never have exchanged the feeling of freedom and closeness with nature that the countryside gave him for the restless urban rhythm. Manuel wasn't accustomed to luxury. He was born into a farmer family. Thus, he learned to cultivate the land with his parents and to collect a variety of beans, which they later sold at the local market. That's how the Montero family earned their living. The family lived modestly, but in harmony and love, appreciating every day that they got to spend together. However, a sudden misfortune befell the small family farm. A group of thieves knocked down the door and broke into the house of the young family in the middle of the night. The thieves started threatening Manuel's parents with weapons. They demanded money, and when Manuel's father refused to give it to them, one of the thieves mercilessly shot him in front of his family. That tragic moment remained embedded in Manuel's memory forever. The 5-year-old boy huddled in the corner of the room and watched with horror in his eyes as his mother poured tears over the cold body of his father. Ever since then, Manuel always felt defenseless and alone, but there was no time to grieve and feel sorry for himself. Manuel had to mature quickly. He understood that he was now the only man in the family and that he needed to help his mother and take care of her. As a very young boy, he took over the responsibility of growing the crop and started working the land from dawn to dusk. The family had to start earning money with virtually no initial capital because they had lost all of the profits from the previous harvest. Manuel's mother, Vanessa, decided to apply for a loan, but the bank rejected her application. It was most likely because they saw a poor woman in front of them. She was modestly dressed and exhausted, and they didn't care why the woman was asking for this money. They didn't know and didn't want to know that it was her only chance to revive her farm and get her life back on track. The young widow returned home in tears. Vanessa was desperate. She didn't know what to do or who to turn to for help. Sure, there was a restaurant in the village which was built on the land rented out from the villagers, including the Montero family, but the owner of the establishment paid ridiculously low rent for it. Unfortunately, Vanessa couldn't get her land back to use it for her own needs, so as to secure at least some kind of income. Thus, she was forced to borrow money from a local gang. Years passed, and when Manuel was 16 years old, he decided that he wasn't going to continue his studies. The young man wanted to work the land and live in the countryside. The money that he managed to save was enough to grow beans twice every season. Now the income was enough to stop borrowing money from the gang. Its leader, however, was furious when he learned that Montero didn't want to borrow money from him at a high interest rate anymore. The man was very angry at the fact that Manuel's family would no longer depend on him. He ordered his subordinates to steal the money that the family had in order to force them to get back down to earth and crawl back to him begging for help. But this time, his plan didn't work. Manuel was very perceptive and had long suspected that the gang leader was involved in the first robbery and the death of his father. So he hid all his savings far away from his house. Therefore, when the gang came and turned everything upside down, they didn't find a single cent and thus had no choice but to leave empty-handed. The young farmer worked with some of the neighbors and managed to significantly increase his crop that year. It was a great success. The Montero family was finally making a good profit working their land. The local residents supported Manuel and were happy to work for him. Now the farmers could cultivate more types of crops and introduce new, more advanced technologies. The farmer turned to the bank to take out a loan for new equipment, but his application got rejected just as his mother's once was. The bank employees saw him as a simple farmer who wasn't worthy of their attention. It was then that Manuel vowed that one day he would create a banking institution which would support small farmers. But his neighbors and even his mother laughed at the young man's crazy dreams. Manuel got married and continued to work on the farm with his wife, Lucia. They had 2 wonderful sons who became reliable heirs of the family business. The old mother couldn't believe that luck finally smiled upon their family. The export of beans started bringing in an unprecedented income, which opened up great opportunities for her son, and the woman saw it as nothing short of a miracle. Manuel bought a brand new SUV, repaired their house, and opened a savings account in the bank. The man also invested a significant amount of money in the stock market, expanded his lands, and diversified the crop. Little by little, Manuel's fortune grew to unprecedented levels. And then came the day when the young man had to visit the very luxurious bank, which at once denied him service. As soon as he stepped inside, Manuel was stopped by the guard. "Sorry, man, but our bank won't serve you. You must have the wrong address." The guard met Manuel with a contemptuous look. At that moment, all the employees and customers laughed out loud. Hearing the fuss, the bank manager came out of his office and ordered the guard to explain what was happening. "Sir, a bank like ours can't serve a simple farmer like this man." The guard tried to justify himself. "He will discredit the establishment with his very presence." "How dare you decide who is allowed into our bank and who is not?" The manager got angry. "You're judging people by their appearance and your own impressions of them. Our guest is Manuel Montero. He is the new owner of our bank, where you no longer work, by the way." Everyone who got to witness the situation couldn't believe that the modest farmer was the owner of this institution. But Manuel took advantage of the moment and turned to his fellow countrymen. "I'd like to ask you to get used to seeing a humble farmer as the director from now on, because I am going to open a credit line specifically for small-time farmers and help simple workers who want to develop their business and earn a living for themselves and their families. You should never judge people by their appearance, wealth, or religion. I lost my father when I was 5 years old and took care of my farm with my own 2 hands from a very young age. I worked my fingers to the bone every single day. My family was repeatedly subjected to ridicule and unjustified attacks. And my mother spent half of her life crying into her pillow, feeling hopeless and exhausted. But now she can finally be proud of me. I want the doors of my bank to be open to everyone who needs help, advice, or just wants to talk. We are all equal here." Manuel wiped a tear off his wrinkled face, while the people gave him a standing ovation. The man's story touched his fellow countrymen to the very depths of their hearts and turned out to be inspirational for many.